afternoon and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to get started and welcoming you and sharing more about today's program on understanding memory. I first want to thank our sponsors. Without them, this program would not be possible. Of course, the Liberty Alzheimer's Partnership, Michelle Kelleher and the Lexington Senior Services Group, their wonderful team really truly made this event possible and letting us utilize this space. Tori Taylor and the team from Deaconess Abundant Life Services for sponsoring this program. You know, without this financial contribution, the support and this program would not be possible. So we truly thank them. I do, before we jump in, want to share a little bit about the Liberty Alzheimer's Partnership and our mission. The mission for the LAP is to provide dementia awareness, education, and support to individuals living with dementia, caregivers, families, and to their greater communities. Their members meet regularly to network, share community resources, and plan events just like this with one another. So a little bit about the members. It's a diverse group of dedicated professionals who are in this room. They're committed to reaching out to families who have loved ones living with dementia and to communities to spread the dementia education. LAP is comprised of professionals representing council on aging, geriatric care managers, home care agencies, aging services, adult day health programs, memory cafes, elder law attorneys, memory care assisted livings, and skilled nursing facilities. We work together collaboratively and support each other and our communities to fulfill our mission. We are non-promotional in nature. The Liberty Alzheimer's Partnership began many years ago as a community partnership model in alliance with the Alzheimer's Association of Mass New Hampshire chapter. The Liberty Alzheimer's Partnership currently serves as a grassroots community-based group comprised of volunteers. So a little bit about what we do is we host 2 educational opportunities a year, and this is one of them. So thank you so much for taking part in it. We want to hold these programs and do them yearly to spread awareness and education about dementia, dementia resources, and service to our communities. We meet monthly and plan community events and networking opportunities. We're always welcoming new members to join the partnership who share a vision to provide dementia awareness, education, and resources. And with this, I would like to take a quick moment for our LAP members to stand, and if you don't mind, to wave, and if we have time to quickly introduce ourselves. So I'll start. I'm Sarah Turcott. I work with Bridges by Epic.
AJ McDonald, Boston Center for Memory.
Michelle Kelleher, Senior Services Director of Town of Lexington.
Hi, I'm Dan Pettit, the Director at the Concord Council on Aging.
Lori Kalinowski from Kalinowski Elder Care Services.
Margaret Hoag, Echo Hoag and O'Connor, attorneys.
Debbie Logan, Minute Women Home Care.
Kathy Sullivan, Minuteman Senior Services, Caregiver Support.
Suzanne Norton, the Jenks Center, Winchester.
Dave Tasto with Assisting Hands Home Care.
Lori Fitzgerald, Assisting Hands Home Care.
Brianna Hall from Cooperative Elder Services. Riley Pratt from Billerica Council on Aging, the activities and events.
Tori Taylor, Director of Deaconess Abundant Life Services.
Whitney Roram, the Director of Clinical Operation at Deaconess Abundant Life Services.
And these are just some of our members. We do have other members who are not here today. So as you can see, a very great team to lean on for resources. These members will be helping us today, and they also have a resource table in the back. If you've not been able to head up to the resource table, we welcome you to. There's other educational opportunities, the newly published resource guide that's been put out by the Liberty Alzheimer's Partnership, and also a wonderful family care guide from the Alzheimer's Association. Please feel welcome to explore the resources. They're right here in our community, and all of these members are happy to help support you. The LAP members, as Lori mentioned, did provide a question card. You're welcome to write these questions throughout the program. Our members can help bring your questions up to be asked towards the end of the program. so that Dr. Vassey can answer our questions. And we also have surveys on the chairs too, so please take a moment before you leave to fill out the survey and feedback. So now, I cannot thank our speaker enough for being here today to share her wonderful knowledge and expertise. Our speaker today is a wonderful resource and partner. Dr. Vassey is the founder and executive director for the Boston Center for Memory, a multi-specialty diagnostic, treatment, and research center for those living with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. Dr. Vassey is a clinical scientist and dementia expert specializing in neuropsychology and behavioral medicine. She is also an assistant professor in the Department of Neurology at the Boston University School of Medicine and serves as an investigator in the clinical core of the Boston University Alzheimer's Disease Center, which is one of 33 Alzheimer's centers funded by the National Institutes of Health to advance research in Alzheimer's disease and other related dementias. Yes, who is right? Dr. Vassey has served as an investigator on more than 50 clinical research trials in diagnostics and pharmacotherapy for mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease, including clinical trials that led to the FDA-approved disease-modifying treatments that target the underlying neuropathology of the disease. Without further ado, I am honored to hand you over and share a warm welcome to Dr. Elizabeth Vassey.
It is a pleasure to be here. Again, I'm Dr. Vassey. I have been working in Alzheimer's disease treatment and research for about 16 years now. And I'm very, very dedicated to one day hopefully eradicating this disease. I have been working in clinical trials for a long, long time, and I can tell you that first decade that I was in this career, not a lot was going on. I felt like we were moving like molasses. I'm seeing some head nods there, yeah. And then all of a sudden, things started happening just in the last 5 years. Things started happening. I'm seeing more head nods. But I'm going to take us back in time a little bit. So back in 1901, what was going on then? 1901, Dr. Alzheimer identified the very first patient with Alzheimer's disease, okay? And he identified the pathology in 1906 after she passed. She had cognitive symptoms, and she also had what we call BPSD. That's simply an acronym that means behavioral and psychiatric symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. She exhibited things like paranoia, even jealousy, that was just abnormal for her. So from 1901, when Dr. Alzheimer first met her, to 1906, when she passed away, that wasn't a lot of time, right? And this is why that's important. Most likely, without knowing for sure, but most likely she was in the middle to late stage part of the disease, right? And this is why it's important. I think we, as a community, when we think about the term of Alzheimer's disease, we, as a community, think about possibly middle to late stage symptoms, right? But this is why it's important. We, as a community, because of the changes in the last 5 years, need to think about Alzheimer's disease differently. We, as a community, need to think about Alzheimer's disease so early on in symptomatology that in casual conversation, none of us would know that the person had the disease. And we need to think about it this way because we need to be proactive in our care of our memory, in our overall health, and we need to be proactive in diagnosing and treating this disease because of the changes that are occurring now. And just the simple fact that all of you are here today tells me that we as a community are already starting to move in that direction. And that is I can't tell you how much I appreciate that you all are here today learning more about this and all the changes that have occurred in the last 5 years. There's never been a more hopeful and encouraging time in Alzheimer's disease treatment and care and focusing on our memory. And I'm seeing a lot of nods out there, and I greatly appreciate that. Okay, so getting to my talk finally. We have a lot to discuss, guys. This is a new era. I'm glad that this talk was set up this way, that we have a full hour, but your wonderful folks here at the partnership set it up so that we have a whole lot of time for questions and answers. So please, as they said, if you have questions, burning questions, I want to address them. There's so much good that's going on right now that there's no way to get to everything in an hour, if you can believe it. But I want to address all your burning questions. So please, if you have a question, write it down, put it in the box for them, and I'll be glad to address it. All right, so given that I was asked to do this talk after the lunch hour, I want to get our juices moving a little bit before I move on. I want to get right to the good stuff. So I'm going to ask a couple true-false questions. All right, just a couple. So, true or false? We can identify the pathology of Alzheimer's disease before anybody has any symptoms. If you think that's true, raise your hand. Okay? If you think it's false. All right. No, this is good. This is good. We're all learning. So, the answer is that we can identify this pathology before anybody has symptoms. I'm going to talk about this a little more later, but I want to make sure that this is on everyone's radar, that we can look at this pathology. This is through amyloid and tau PET scans, but to be clear, we can only get these scans if we have symptoms as of right now. Okay, so I want to be real clear about that. But this pathology develops before people even have symptoms. So that's why it's important. All right, next question. Can we identify this pathology in the blood? True? Raise your hand. Good. False? It's true. The FDA recently approved the first blood-based biomarkers through amyloid and tau, and I'll explain what amyloid and tau is as well. But those are the markers in Alzheimer's disease pathology. All right, last one. True or false? Do we have treatments now that actually impact the underlying neuropathology of Alzheimer's disease in people that have really mild symptoms? True? False? All right, good, yes. Most of you know now that we have 2 new FDA-approved treatments that actually impacts the underlying neuropathology in Alzheimer's disease. So when I talk about we as a community thinking about Alzheimer's disease differently, being proactive, this is why it's important, because this is for people with very, very early symptoms. We have Leqembi and we have Kisunla. Kisunla was approved July 2nd, 2024. It's been out around about a year, a little more than a year. So we need, as a community, need to get this word out. We need to help people be proactive and identify and treat this very early on for those reasons. All right. So again, this is for people with what we call mild cognitive impairment. If we think about memory on a spectrum, on one end of the spectrum, we have people can have that pathology but have no symptoms. On the other end of the spectrum, we have Alzheimer's disease. I'm pointing the wrong way, guys. We have Alzheimer's disease. It's like a weatherman out here. We have Alzheimer's disease, and then something in the middle, we have mild cognitive impairment. Has anybody heard that term before? Excellent. Okay, what is mild cognitive impairment? Yes. What is mild cognitive impairment? What's the difference between mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease? Mild cognitive impairment simply means that you have very, very mild symptoms, and you're noticing it. It's a difference. It's not you. And it may be frustrating. It may take you longer to do things. You notice a difference, but it's not impacting with your day-to-day functioning, okay? And that's really the difference between mild cognitive impairment and very mild stage Alzheimer's disease. So if you think of it this way, let's say that you're somebody that's really good at managing your taxes every year. You're good at tax time. So somebody with mild cognitive impairment or MCI, they notice it takes longer, it's frustrating, but they get through it, right? But they notice there's a change. They can't whiz through these taxes like they used to. Somebody with very mild stages of Alzheimer's disease, that person is going to need a little bit of help. They just can't manage it any longer themselves. Maybe they start having piles and piles of paper. They can't organize anymore. Maybe there's some calculation errors. And they say, you know what, I need some help from my spouse or a tax advisor or whoever that might be. That's really the difference between these two. But the reason that this is important is these new treatments are for people that have mild cognitive impairment in very, very early stages of Alzheimer's disease. And that's why I'm focused on this proactive treatment. Now, to be clear, there are things that we're looking at in later stages. So I'm not just going to focus on this early proactive treatment, but it is our responsibility as a community to start focusing on that, because guess what? These treatments are just going to keep getting better, right? Okay. All right, let's talk about the pathology of Alzheimer's disease. So we have what's called amyloid. Amyloid is a sticky protein that clumps together. It becomes toxic, and it leads to tau or tau tangles. And this is what Dr. Alzheimer's identified in his patient in 1906 after she died. All right, so we call these the Jack curves. The author of these developed this, and what he was trying to show is that when you have these biomarkers where you can detect the pathology before there's symptoms, we now know that the pathology of Alzheimer's disease can be detected even up to 25 years, if you can believe it, before any of us develop symptoms. Think about it like precancerous cells, right? Do we want that to accumulate until we kind of see what might happen? Or do we want to get that out of there, right? If you think about it kind of in the same vein of Alzheimer's pathology, it just starts accumulating in the brain. And we literally can have this pathology in the brain for 10, 15, 20, 25 years before any of us develop symptoms. I think there's a real potential opportunity there. Now, we have to have symptoms right now to get treatment, but I'm going to talk about some of these opportunities later. But what happens is pathology can be detected through blood, through tau and amyloid PET scans, through cerebral spinal fluid, and then eventually as it accumulates, we start developing symptoms. We get mild cognitive impairment, and then we develop Alzheimer's disease. And in Alzheimer's disease, that's where it impacts day-to-day functioning, okay? So I'm going to break it down a little bit more for you. Is that big enough for all of you in the back there? Can you see that? I hope so. Okay. If you see this, that is a brain cell. It's supposed to be a brain cell, okay? We have these strands going inside and out of the brain cells. They're called amyloid precursor proteins. They send messages back and forth through the brain. Then we've got these enzymes that literally cleave or cut. Can you see this here? They're like scissors. They literally cut on that precursor protein. And when they do that, these little pieces break apart. They start clumping together, becoming monomers, what are called monomers, oligomers, and eventually they develop into these beta amyloid plaques. And when they become plaques, they become sticky, right? And become toxic. And that's outside of our brain cells. And that starts this cascade process that leads to those tau tangles. And once it reaches tau, tau starts to spread through the brain, causes those symptoms. So these new treatments they attack these plaques. We want to remove these plaques as quickly as we can. And that's what these new treatments, Leqembi and Kisunla, are aimed at doing. They remove those plaques. So if you think about this treatment very early on, very mild symptoms, we're removing those plaques. And the goal of these treatments is to preserve function. We want to preserve function as long as possible. The goal is stability. So if you think of changes looking like this, right? We want to turn that slope of the line. We want things to be as stable as possible for as long as possible. And that's what these treatments are aimed at doing. Everybody with me? All right. So I have to give credence to the very first FDA-approved treatment that was aimed at removing this pathology. It's no longer marketed in the US, but no longer is the first FDA-approved symptomatic treatment for Alzheimer's disease. Anybody know what the very first treatment for Alzheimer's disease was? FDA approved in 1993. I heard Dementia. Aricept. No longer marketed in the US. It's called Cognex. I think they still prescribe it in Europe, but it was given 4 times a day. And then the one it approved after that was donepezil or Aricept, which a lot of us know in this room, right? Right. Well, same thing here. The very first FDA-approved treatment that was aimed at removing pathology and slowing or preserving function was Aduhelm. And this is their data, and it's clear that all these what we call anti-amyloid treatments do the same thing. They remove amyloid and they slow progression of symptoms, preserve function, keep things as stable as long as possible, okay? So this is a PET amyloid scan, all right? This is how we can detect amyloid pathology. So you see these red hot spots? That's amyloid, okay? So this was a dose-dependent treatment in the study. So some people had the placebo, some people had 3 milligrams, some had 6, and some had 10, okay? So after a year, they rescanned these folks. Obviously, the placebo remained the same. And then if you look at 3 milligrams, you see a change there in the back. Can you see that? And then we go to 6 milligrams, reduced, and 10. Do you see any hot spots there? No, it's gone. And everybody at that highest level dose had amyloid removed completely. And that's exactly what Kisunla and Leqembi does. It targets those plaques and clears them. All right, how do we distinguish dementia from normal aging or memory problems from normal aging? That early on, so this is a slide I've had for years and years and years. I don't like it anymore. Why is that? Because we're detecting and treating so early that you can't tell the difference. You really can't. So when in doubt, get screened, get a clinical evaluation, get to the bottom of this. Why? Because we have newer treatments now that are aimed at removing this pathology, and you got to do it early. But we always ask about what's the difference. We don't really know. I used to go through this in detail, and I've seen so many patients over the last several years now that in some people you can't tell. Now that we're detecting this so early, I have some patients that come in where their spouse says, nah, I don't notice a change, but the person says, I think I know something's different. I can just tell. And because we're getting more and more proactive about it, they can see a difference. So when in doubt, don't question it. Just get evaluated. Be proactive. There are newer treatments. They are only available for very early symptoms. All right? And I'm getting rid of this slide in my next talk. All right. The National Institute on Aging with the Alzheimer's Association developed actual guidelines for a proper evaluation of Alzheimer's disease. They have since updated those guidelines, but I'm going to talk about a clinical evaluation first, and then we'll talk about those updated guidelines. So I talk about the best, in quotes, diagnosis is based on a history. We need to hear what those subtle changes are. Maybe it's something as subtle as, I have to kind of think where I'm going a little bit, and it's just new for me. The biggest thing is, when I talk to patients, they may say, oh, I've always been bad with names, which I am. I recognize faces, but I'm really bad with names. But maybe it's getting worse. Or maybe you're noticing something that you're really good at, but that's getting worse. It's about change. And don't fret. You may notice a change, but your cognition may be absolutely fine. So you just need to get it checked. Memory changes as early as our 30s, if you can believe it, right? What else changes as early as our 30s? Maybe our hair color? Maybe we can't run as fast? Maybe we can't see as well and need glasses? I think I'm getting there. I can't believe I've hung on this long. But everything changes. Memory changes as well, and it does change throughout the course of our lifetime. So that's why I say, don't guess, just get it checked. We don't know. The only people that know can do these proper evaluations, and we want to get it checked and be proactive. Formal cognitive assessment. So you need to have a cognitive assessment as part of it. Imaging, so an MRI, that's to rule out things like tumors, strokes, other things that can make memory worse, but may not necessarily be due to Alzheimer's disease. Our physicians are also looking at changes in the brain that are consistent with what you'd expect to see in patterns such as Alzheimer's disease, but really ruling out those other things that may cause changes. We want to do blood work. There's certain things that can contribute to memory appearing worse than it is. If you have low B12, for example, that certainly can contribute, or D. A neuroexam, and we're now adding a biomarker. A biomarker are those blood tests and those tau and PET scan, amyloid PET scans, because now we're detecting pathology as part of an evaluation. That's part of these evaluations, if there are symptoms that are detected, and that's the key. All right. If you see somebody and they tell you you have dementia, and that's all they say, the next thing out of your mouth, repeat after me. What is causing the dementia? Say it with me. What is causing the dementia? Dementia is not a diagnosis. Dementia simply means that you have cognitive changes. Alzheimer's disease is the most common cause of dementia. We got it? All right. I can't tell you how many times I see on records and things the word dementia. Watch out for your loved ones. Make sure they get to the bottom of what's causing the dementia. Same thing for mild cognitive impairment. If you or a loved one gets diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, the next words out of your mouth are, what is causing the mild cognitive impairment? We need to get to the bottom of this. Why? Time is of the essence, and we need to be proactive with these new treatments. But it doesn't matter. No matter what stage of disease is going on, we've got to know what's going on because we need to take care of that person and treat them properly.
So who's going to tell us those differences?
So this wonderful gentleman just asked, who's going to tell us those differences? I'm seeing a lot of nods there. Well, whoever told you you have dementia or you have mild cognitive impairment should be able to answer that question. And if they can't, they should be saying, you know what? Some things are unclear. We need to do a little more to get to the bottom of this. And maybe it's through an amyloid PET scan or a blood-based biomarker or other things. But whoever is evaluating you should be able to address that question. It's also important that you see somebody just like anything else. If you're to get a procedure, surgery, you want to see a surgeon that's done that procedure thousands of times, right? Especially if something's not clear, you want to see somebody that specializes in this because we need to get to the bottom of this so we can take care of things, right? But the physician you see or clinician should be able to address that question. That's a great question. All right, so we talked about this, that likely the plaques and tangles begin to accumulate many, many years. We talked about more than 25 years before symptoms. And now we have a biological definition of Alzheimer's disease. It's based on biomarkers. Why? Because we're detecting and treating this very early. So now they've added these blood-based biomarkers and amyloid and tau PET scans as part of these evaluations. And that's the updated criteria. But there's other diagnostic assessments that I just want you to be aware of, okay? Some of these are not definitive to be clear, but if there's questions about Parkinson's disease, there's a DAT scan that can help with that. If there's questions about language variance, frontal temporal dementia, behavioral variance, there's an FDG PET. These two are not definitive to be clear, but it helps your clinician in trying to rule things out a little bit there. Then you've got the amyloid blood test and p-tau blood tests now. We've got the amyloid and tau PET scans, and we also have ApoE genotyping. ApoE genotyping, that's a susceptibility gene, okay? If you have ApoE, and it's homozygous, meaning you have a 4-4 copy from both parents, it puts you at an increased risk of developing the disease, but I want to be real clear, it's not an inevitability. The reason I wanted to talk about that is there's a lot of discussion out there about ApoE genotyping. It's not an autosomal dominant gene. So I generally do not have any of my patients go out and get this genotyping unless we're going to refer them and consider them for these new treatments. Why? Because if you are ApoE homozygous, I'm seeing some nods, I love that everybody's knowing these things, is that you can have an increased risk of a known side effect with these treatments, and that's why that's important, okay? But we don't do this in general because it's really a susceptibility gene. Statistically speaking, it's kind of like taking a bunch of darts, throwing them at a board and hoping one sticks. It doesn't tell you anything about your inheritability. It's not autosomal dominant, so I want to be real clear about that. All right, you with me? Okay. All right, steps to successful treatment of Alzheimer's disease. We talked about early detection and why. Now we're going to talk about treatment of symptoms. So there's a lot of symptomatic treatments out there. You probably recognize a lot of these. There's a couple that's come out, like benzglanamine, that actually helps with some of the GI side effects that could be a part of that. You also have the Exelon patch that can help with that. But these are all the FDA-approved treatments that treat symptoms. So most of these work on a neurotransmitter in the brain called acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is really important for our memory, mood, and function. Ooh, everything okay over there? Okay, good. So we want to boost that, and because it activates on mood and functioning as well, some people tend to feel literally brighter when they take these treatments. But it helps improve our memory, and that's specifically what these are aimed at doing, is improving our memory. So a lot of clinicians will start people on these early on to treat that. I have memantine in red here, and Namenda is the other name for it. This is really FDA-approved middle to late stage disease. It often helps with if people have low energy level, no get up and go. It can help with apathy and is typically added to one of these other treatments. And that's why I have that in red there. But these are all symptomatic treatments, okay? The most common things that I hear from patients, this is just showing you. So this is symptomatic benefit. So there's a lot of myths about these treatments. You may have heard these treatments don't work. You may hear they slow progression. That's not necessarily what they do. It's kind of like turning the clock back a little bit. Because it's symptomatic and improves symptoms, as soon as you reach that full benefit and potential, things start to change a little bit. But the reason that's important is they're changing here versus here if you were not treated. So it's important to stay on these treatments as long as you or your loved one is getting benefit, okay? But these are the most common things that we hear from patients. More alert, more talkative, brighter, more outgoing, less agitated even because it activates on mood. What we typically do when our medical team prescribes these treatments, we usually want to see that person back in about 2 to 3 months because they'll be stable on the medication, and we want to hear from the person and their family if they're noticing differences, but we also have ways in which to objectively see if they're getting benefit from that treatment through some very short cognitive assessments. All right? Symptomatic treatments are not good enough. We know that. And these treatments have been around for a really long time. These are probably the treatments that are most familiar to you, right? But back to our new era. We now talk about a brain-healthy lifestyle. Imagine that, right? You hear it everywhere. It's all over the place. It's everywhere. And that's good. We never talked about that before. Why is that important? It's important because there's two wonderful studies out there where they followed people over a long period of time. People that exercised, had social interaction, followed a very healthy diet. And the goal is to preserve our cognition, to keep our brain otherwise healthy. We want to stave off those potential symptoms if pathology develops for as long as we possibly can. What is brain health, though? So there are a lot of things when we talk about brain health, but I like to talk about the things that have the best evidence. There's other things that we need to focus on, like sleep, reducing stress, developing good coping mechanisms.
Sorry.
No worries, here you go.
Thank you.
But the things that have the best evidence include a healthy diet. So you may have heard of the Mediterranean diet or the DASH diet or the MIND diet. They all have some essence of the Mediterranean diet. All right, everybody knows what that is, right? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nods there. Exercise. These are my parents. They're on the Cape. This has been a while ago now, but I'm really disappointed about one thing in this picture. What's missing? Yes, no helmets. What were they thinking? Seriously.
Maybe they took them off the picture.
I'll have to tell them you said that and try to defend them. It's not working, though. They definitely heard it from me. And doing things that are new and different. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to do brain games online. You don't have to do anything in particular. I have a family who's doing math problems every night. You don't have to do that. Just activities that are new and different. So I'll give you some examples. I know somebody that's picking up a musical instrument. They play other instruments. They're trying one that they'd never tried before. Trying a new recipe. I have somebody that writes cookbooks and other things, so they're trying out a brand new cookbook that they've never tried before. They love cooking. Try pottery. There's a lot of games out there. I heard our physician talking about, I forget what it's called. It's a version of golf, but it's not golf. It's like a frisbee golf game. I don't even remember what it's called. Disc golf. That's it. They're trying that right now. So it doesn't matter what it is as long as it's new and different. And equally as important, as long as it brings you joy and not stress, right? If you're doing something new and different and you really dislike it, don't do it. Stress is not good for your brain either. But just trying new things is important. And social interactions. I can't tell you how much evidence there's out there about social interactions. You need to be around other people. Think about the pandemic and all that isolation and how that impacted a lot of people. We saw that in our families too at the clinic. I mean, it was really impressive. And those social connections are really important for overall brain health. So even if you get a cup of coffee with a friend, have a couple people over for dinner, it doesn't have to be major events, but that human connection, that social interaction is really essential for our overall brain health. Really essential. Ooh, now we have mood lighting now. That's not part of this list, by the way. And now we've got strategies to halt or slow progression, okay? Those strategies include these two new treatments. These are medications that are aimed at removing pathology and slowing the progression of the disease. Look them up, tell your friends, tell your family. It's important that we as a community educate others that there are newer treatments, that they're proactive and get evaluated, detected, and see if they're a candidate for these new treatments. This is really, really important. So back to the symptomatic benefit. So we talked about those symptomatic treatments. They give us that boost and then things change a little bit. So if you add on these disease-modifying treatments, what we call them Leqembi and Kisunla, that's aimed at slowing progression. So people take these things together because they have completely different mechanisms of action. We want to boost and treat symptoms, and we also want to slow that slope of the line. Slow that progression of the disease. We want to change that slope and make it as stable as we possibly can for as long as possible. And my goal, and my team's goal, who work on this every single day in clinical research, our goal is to halt the progression of this disease. Every single day. How do we do that? Clinical trials. So the reason we have these two new FDA-approved treatments is through clinical trials. That's because people in your community from around the US, from around the world, these are scientists from around the globe that work every single day to try to find newer and better treatments for you, your families, and your community. And the only way we get those new treatments is through clinical research. That's why we have Leqembi and that's why we have Kisunla, because people like you participated in those clinical research trials. I'm raising that because even though we have these two new FDA-approved treatments, which is huge, we all need to focus on that. We all need to talk to our families and friends and let people know within the community that these are available. But guess what? These treatments are just going to keep getting better and better and better. They're going to get better over time. And we're already seeing some other mechanisms of action and research that are impressive, that people now are participating in from around the world, that they're doing every day. And these newer treatments are really important. We're now looking at preclinical treatment. So I talked about these treatments, you have to have very mild symptoms. We know this pathology develops many years before there are symptoms. So this group of people are actually using these newer treatments. We know they have pathology, but they have no symptoms on cognitive assessment. And the goal and hope is to remove that pathology to hopefully prevent people from ever developing symptoms. And the only way we're going to know the answers to those questions is through clinical research participation. It's the only way. We participated in all the FDA-approved anti-amyloid treatments. Our clinical director, Dr. Solomon, was involved in every single clinical trial that led to every single FDA-approved treatment we have today. He actually predicted that one day we'd have these anti-amyloid therapies that we have today. It's pretty, I always tell him it must be wild to watch these changes over the years. His very first trial that he ever did as an investigator was Cognex in 1993, the very first FDA-approved treatment we have in Alzheimer's disease. We also did the clinical trials that led to the first amyloid PET ligand that we have today. We were involved in those trials as well. So we're seeing changes in the research that we're doing. But the only way we see changes is through clinical research participation. So please spread the word. I'm very encouraged about the last 5 years and what we've seen change in the field, but it's the only way we do this is through clinical research participation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at our center. So these new treatments at our center, there are clinical trials ongoing right now where people may have cognitive concerns, no changes on assessment, but maybe they have a family history of Alzheimer's disease. And what they do is they actually check to see if that person has pathology. And if they're eligible, they are going to get treated in a trial to remove that pathology. So those are some trials going on right now. They're using Kisunla and Leqembi in those trials, and they're also working on a next generation newer treatment in those trials that's even more impressive at removing pathology at a faster rate. The other things that we're doing is we're looking at trials right now doing the same thing for people that have mild cognitive impairment or mild stage Alzheimer's disease, next generation, removing pathology, slowing symptoms. And we're also looking at newer symptomatic treatments, so next generation symptomatic treatments. And to be clear, we want to include our middle to late stage community. We are very focused on early treatment and even preclinical treatment because our goal as a clinic is to hopefully eradicate this disease one day, but there's so many people out there that have this disease and have middle stage symptoms, have late stage symptoms. We are actively focused on that as well. That is not something we don't want to focus on because there's many, many people out there still experiencing this. So for our patients that have middle stage symptoms or late stage symptoms, we are actively looking at symptomatic treatment for cognition, and we're also looking at some of those behavioral and psychiatric symptoms that people can experience in middle to late stage disease. So right now we're doing clinical trials on newer medications to treat agitation. There is an FDA-approved treatment called Rexulti out there that has been FDA approved. It was initially indicated for a psychiatric condition, but people are using it, physicians are using it. It really is helpful for more of the aggressive behaviors, is really what Rexulti is indicated for, but we are looking at more agitation in clinical trials and treatment in this area. So a little bit about our missions at our center. We're very big on education, obviously. This is how we move the field forward. Tell others, please tell others. We want people to know about these newer treatments, how to get detected and treated early. That's how we move this field forward. We're multi-specialty. We're multi-specialty by design. We want to have different backgrounds come together and really take care of the patient and family as a whole. We have a whole team of people that do a lot of different things at our center. We're all under one roof by design. And we also provide follow-up care and diagnostic evaluations. And of course, as they said earlier, and what I said just now, we do a lot of research. We were the first full-time memory center in all of Boston when we initially opened in 2012. I could be wrong about this, so don't quote me on that. I know I'm getting video recorded right now, but I still think to date we're the only center that has as many clinical trials ongoing in Alzheimer's disease as we do. What inspires us to do that in clinical research is our diagnostic and treatment center. It's our patients and families. That's why we do as much clinical research as we do, because we recognize what is available to our patients and families is not good enough. And that's why we have that research available to people. That's how we move this field forward. I've had this slide for a long time, more than 45,000 visits. I think I've had this slide since, I don't know how many years now, but it's been a long time. And these collectively, I would have to admit that our clinical director has done most of these, but at our center with him involved, we have been a part of all of these things that have been FDA approved in clinical research, the work that has led to these treatments that we have today. This is where we work. We don't occupy that entire building, but it is an impressive picture, right? Don't be disappointed if you come. I will show you. It's 180 Wells Avenue. I think 2 slides up, I have the exact address for you. This is Walter. We also have a certified therapy dog that hangs out at the clinic. Don't worry, if you're allergic or don't like dogs, we will remove him. But he gets lots and lots of requests, and inevitably, if he's not there one day, I get very, very upset patients and family members who say, "Where in the world is he? He is the only reason I come to this clinic." All right, here's the address. AJ McDonald, I want to point out my lovely colleague over here. Wave, wave, wave.
I didn't know my picture was on the slide.
You knew I was going to do that. She is our practice administrator. She is also our care navigator. She does a lot of work with our patients and families, providing them resources and recommendations. She is a part of our clinical care team as well, and she's here today, so I wanted to point her out. And this is her contact information up here, but this is also our address. We are in Newton, right on the corner, right on the edge of Newton and Needham, off the highway. We're in an office park, and we have free parking, which apparently is a big deal in the greater Boston area. And when we first opened this clinic, all of the researchers at the Alzheimer's Disease Center at Boston University drew circles literally on a map together and chose this general area. I think for a lot of those reasons. Off the highway, we've got parking. We try to make it as easy as possible for people. And a big thank you to our hosts, our sponsor. Thank you so much for putting this together. You guys have a wonderful partnership here that worked very hard in providing these educational series and other resources. There's tables in the back. You might have seen them already, but please go there. They have information and other good stuff that will really be helpful. So thank you so much.
I think the cost of the drug is like $25,000 a year. How does one make that available to everybody? I know Medicare covers it, but if you're not that old.
Yes, Medicare covers it. A lot of commercial insurers covered it as well. If you're not that old, Eli Lilly is the manufacturer of Kisunla, or donanemab is the other name. Eisai is the manufacturer of Leqembi or lecanemab. Both have contact information that you can reach out to for help with costs. I don't know all the details of that help provided, but I know that they have resources that are worth reaching out to if there's concern about cost coverage for people that are younger.
The taxpayers pay it for people who are older.
Yeah, Medicare and insurers, absolutely. Yeah.
Can everyone hear me if I read these questions out loud so Dr. Vassey can hold the mic? So there were a few questions regarding for a person who's starting to notice symptoms. What are the first symptoms to look for, and can it be brought on by trauma? There was quite a few questions about first symptoms to look for, and can this be brought on by trauma?
Did everybody hear that? Okay. So first symptoms can be all kinds of things. First symptoms can be depression. It doesn't have to be cognition. First symptoms can be anxiety. First symptoms can be having trouble calculating things. First symptoms can be getting lost while driving. What I'm trying to say, I guess, is it can be so different for different people. And that's why I say don't guess, don't try to figure it out on your own. If you're noticing a change, and that's the key word, if you're noticing a change, don't guess, don't try to figure it out on your own. Talk to your doctor about it. Schedule an evaluation. We offer free memory screens at our center. That's something that our clinical director has always been committed to for the community for his entire career. And we do that because we don't want people to question it. We want people to be proactive and get assessed and get evaluated and not to question it, because there really is no way to figure it out on your own. I know that's not an exact answer, but that is the answer. You're looking for changes. Whatever those changes look like for you, you're looking for those changes, and they can be so many different things. There's no real roadmap for this, but when in doubt, if you're noticing changes, don't try to figure it out on your own. Be proactive and get assessed. And the other question, can it be brought on by trauma? That's a really good question, because so trauma can be a lot of different things, right? In a lot of people, they can have what I call an unmasking experience. I don't know if the person asking this question is talking about trauma when they were younger, but if you have very subtle changes that are already starting that may not even be noticeable to you, maybe not, or other people, and then you have a car accident, a surgery, a huge life change, like a death in the family, any of those kinds of things, all of a sudden it can cause this unmasking effect where, whoa, all of a sudden we're noticing symptoms here. And it's not necessarily that those experiences cause the symptoms. There was already something kind of going on there and brewing, but it just caused this kind of unmasking experience where now we're really noticing these symptoms.
Thank you. How do treatments Leqembi and
Kisunla?
Thank you. Attack the amyloid? What are the side effects?
Great question. And I didn't address that, I realized. So thank you for whoever raised that. So it's attacking those amyloid plaques specifically. So I talked about two different pathologies involved in Alzheimer's disease. We talked about amyloid, which is outside the brain cells, and then we talked about tau, which is inside and outside the brain cells and starts causing those symptoms. These two new treatments, Leqembi and Kisunla, only go after amyloid. Okay, they don't touch tau. However, we are conducting clinical trials right now that are anti-tau treatments, and they are for people that have mild symptoms. Eventually, is this real wood? Eventually, our goal is to put these treatments together. People will be on a cocktail of medications, anti-amyloid and anti-tau. But anti-tau treatments are a little bit behind anti-amyloid treatments in clinical trials. Clinical trials in anti-amyloid treatments had a huge head start. I've been working on those since 2009, if you can believe it. So there was a lot of time there and a lot of learning. But anti-tau clinical trials are a little bit behind. So we need more people participating in that. But to answer your question specifically, these two new treatments only target amyloid.
How effective are they?
In my opinion, very
Statistically.
So they talk about a percentage of slowing, okay? I could spend an entire talk just talking to you about that. What we know is there's people, interestingly, let's talk about Kisunla specifically. So in the main phase 3 trial, they also looked at tau levels, okay? And the reason they did that is they wanted to see a difference between people that had a lower level of tau, meaning amyloid only led to a little bit of tau, so much, much earlier on, and then they wanted to kind of get a peek at the whole population that had higher levels of tau. Statistically, they showed that both of those groups benefited from this treatment. There was a statistically significant difference between people that were treated than weren't, both in the low medium tau levels and the high tau levels. They both benefited, but guess who benefited more? Yes, low medium. Why is that important? Proactive, early detection, early treatment. Everybody benefited, but clearly people that were detected really early and that tau hadn't really accumulated benefited more. We did all these anti-amyloid trials. We're following people over time because we see a lot of those people clinically. I've seen some people that have not changed cognitively in 8 or 9 years. Now, to be clear, I heard a lot of wows, which is good, but to be clear, not everybody has that kind of reaction to this, and I want to really manage expectations on this. And that's because, this is anecdotal to be clear, but what patterns that we've seen anecdotally, I want to be clear about that, is people that were as early as you possibly could be tended to benefit more than people that were kind of lower level, mild stage. Doesn't mean that everybody doesn't benefit. I have seen people get treated that I do see change over time, but we don't know what life would look like if they were untreated, right? But anecdotally speaking, I've seen people not change for years.
Amazing. Curiosity question, why was Cognex stopped in the US?
Well, when you have to take it 4 times a day and you have memory problems.
I think enough said. So this person's question, they have a family history of Alzheimer's disease. They're experiencing memory issues. How do they qualify for PET testing, scans, and have it covered?
Can you repeat that one more time, please?
They have a family history of Alzheimer's disease.
Okay.
They're experiencing memory issues. How do they go about qualifying for PET scans, testing, and having it covered under their benefit?
Okay, so everybody heard that? Yeah. So if you're noticing changes, I guess we can't get a clarifying question on this, but it sounds like they already detected symptoms, maybe through an evaluation. If you're evaluated and they detect cognitive changes on your assessment that fits a pattern that you'd expect to see with somebody with mild cognitive impairment, mild stage Alzheimer's disease, or could be either one, and the history fits that, then they will submit that information, with your permission of course, to your insurance to get an approval to cover an amyloid PET scan.
There's also research budgets. People can volunteer for research budgets.
That's right. So this wonderful person here said that you can also volunteer for research projects. In research, your insurance is not submitted to at all. It's completely covered by the sponsor. You don't need to pay anything. So if some people are concerned about insurance, they want to participate in research, and if they're eligible, that's another avenue of getting biomarkers. Now, the caveat to that is some research will not give you the results of those biomarkers. So I must say that. So if you're at a research site and you're screening, you want to screen for a trial, and part of the reason you want to do that is to have access to these biomarkers, make sure that you ask the person that's going over the information, am I going to get the results of these biomarkers? Great point. Thank you for that.
Great advice. All right, it says here, if you do not have Alzheimer's and you have gone through the testing, what might you have?
Well, I have over 150 answers to that question. Seriously. There's over 150 causes of changes in memory. So that's why you need a great question, whoever brought that up. That's why you need to get a very comprehensive diagnostic evaluation, the best evaluation, quotes, that I put up here that includes all of those things that I talked about. That's how you're going to get to the bottom of what's causing those changes. Now, to be clear, even with some of the best people out there that know everything there is to know about memory disorders, there may be a lot of complicated factors in your medical history, what you're reporting, what the biomarkers are showing, that maybe it's not so clear right now. You may not meet full clinical criteria for certain conditions, but maybe your clinician wants to kind of monitor and follow you so that things are more revealed as time goes on. I know that doesn't sound great, but I just want to really manage expectations that you want to get answers to things, but sometimes there may not be clear answers right away because it's a good thing. We're moving the needle and we're being more and more proactive, but because the diagnostic criteria has certain things that you got to meet, maybe I'm getting an inkling that you may have a certain diagnosis, but it's not really fully representing itself. So we're going to take care of you and monitor and follow and see what we see over time.
Thank you. Are there other causes besides tau and amyloid?
For Alzheimer's disease specifically?
They don't say.
Okay. So in terms of Alzheimer's disease specifically, amyloid is the known marker. If you don't have amyloid pathology, you do not have Alzheimer's disease, period. Now, with that being said, there's other what we call tauopathies. What is a tauopathy? So there's other things that can occur in our brain that leads to tau. So in Alzheimer's disease specifically, amyloid leads to tau, but there's other things that can lead to tau. For example, there's a condition called PART, primary age-related tauopathy. PART does not have amyloid. So you can't have a positive amyloid PET scan to have PART, but it can mimic the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. Okay? Typically people develop it more in 80s, 90s, but I've been seeing more and more patients lately. It's a term that you may have not heard before. It's a relatively newer term, and I think we're still learning more about it as experts in the field. We're learning more about it.
Is that not as serious as Alzheimer's?
It mimics symptoms. I think the thing about it is there's no treatments for it, right? So,
Because they've done no research on it.
Correct. We don't know nearly as much about PART as we do Alzheimer's. You know, Alzheimer's has a stigma around that term, but guess what? More than any other form of dementia, we have more options than anything else in terms of treatment. Yeah, great point. Yeah. Are we doing cards? Or?
Within the last couple of months, there was a front page, a story in the Boston Globe about lithium orotate.
Yes.
Would you comment on that, and do you have any of that in any of your clinical trials?
Great question. So he was asking about lithium. Everybody heard about that?
Yeah, that was with bipolar.
Big news lately, yes. So I think that there's a lot of encouraging research out there. When I talk about evidence-based information, I talk about high-quality evidence to low-quality evidence. And periodically over time, there's certain things that come out in the media that get a lot of news. It's encouraging, it's hopeful, it's interesting. The literature says that, right, people with Alzheimer's disease have lower levels of lithium. And there's a lot of other things that went along with that. But we haven't done the proper work of having a high-quality, multi-site, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial with people from around the world with thousands and thousands of patients trying this treatment. Now, does that mean that it does not work? No. We just don't know. There's a lot of interesting research in animal models, but I can't tell you how many times things work beautifully in animal models. It's gorgeous research that just don't show up in human trials. So I think that it's encouraging, it's interesting. Do we have patients taking it? Yes. Do we necessarily recommend it? It's more of an educational discussion. But I think there's more we need to know about it.
Thank you.
Of course.
And just so, oh, sorry, we still have questions in the cards.
What's the safe dose?
I'm not going to answer that question.
One size doesn't fit all.
I would, the thing about supplements like that, they're supplements. They haven't been scrutinized like other treatments we take. So I would, as much as I want to answer your question, I probably shouldn't. And I think you should talk to your primary care about that. Great question. What dose to take of lithium?
All right, next question. Are there treatments available for people who are taking blood thinners?
Good question. Okay, so let's talk about blood thinners. So I imagine the person that raised this is probably because they heard about we didn't talk about the known side effect of Kisunla and Leqembi. My apologies. We got sidetracked, or I got sidetracked. There is a known, I'm getting to the point with the blood thinners, by the way. This ties into that. There is a known side effect of Leqembi and Kisunla called ARIA. It's an acronym. It stands for amyloid-related imaging abnormalities, okay? And this is why. In the brain, amyloid is wrapped around blood vessels. So when these antibodies, Kisunla or Leqembi, attach to that pathology, it pulls off of those blood vessels. When it pulls off of those blood vessels, it can potentially, in some people, cause one of two things. One is ARIA-E, so a little swelling in the brain. The other one is ARIA-H. These are these microscopic bleeds. Now, you think to yourself, oh my goodness, bleeding in the brain, that doesn't sound very good. We can have these microscopic bleeds just having Alzheimer's disease. We can have these microscopic bleeds as we age without having any of these treatments. These microscopic bleeds can exist in the brain. We've known about these for a long time. And in fact, in the clinical trials of Leqembi and Kisunla, guess what? People on placebo had these microscopic bleeds, right? So, but that's how that can happen. To be clear, these are manageable side effects. What the label has is in those first 24 weeks as you're being treated, you have periodic MRIs. And the role of those MRIs is to identify whether ARIA is present. If ARIA is present, dependent upon the level, mild, moderate, or severe, your clinician, your physician will make a judgment of what to do with that. If it's a very mild case and you're asymptomatic, you can continue treatment typically. If you're symptomatic and you're a mild case, it's a discussion with your doctor about whether you would continue. Obviously, if you have all of a sudden a lot of microhemorrhages, this may not be a good treatment for you, just like side effects for other treatments, right? Aricept can cause GI side effects. If you have explosive diarrhea, we're going to stop that treatment, right? So this is a manageable side effect. It's monitored appropriately. If you are symptomatic with ARIA, what a lot of people often report is headaches, dizziness, increased confusion, things like that. But I can't tell you how many times even, people that participated across trials, we would detect ARIA on a scan, call them and say, hey, have you been experiencing any of these symptoms? They said, well, actually, I was feeling a little dizzy the other day, but they never reported it. So, sometimes people don't even notice these things. But it is manageable. You just need to make sure you're in the hands of somebody that has a lot of experience. A lot of the major hospitals have a lot of experience now, have been prescribing Leqembi and Kisunla. There's a lot of private neurology clinics that are doing this now. If you contact Eisai and Eli Lilly, they actually have a locator for you where you can identify places that are prescribing this. Now back to the blood thinners. Yes? Okay. Back to the blood thinners. So there's no contraindication of taking Kisunla or Leqembi on blood thinners. All right? You can be on blood thinners. However, and that's with a capital H, if I talked about the ApoE genotyping earlier, if you're on a blood thinner And if you're ApoE homozygous, you're at an increased risk of developing ARIA, okay? So that's going to have to be a discussion with you and your physician about whether that's a right treatment for you. Because if you're on a blood thinner, you have an increased risk of some of these side effects. Now, we had people in trials that were on these blood thinners. We as a group, as of right now, think that there needs to be more real world data with people on blood thinners. We'd rather see somebody on blood thinners not be ApoE4 homozygous. There are physicians that are prescribing these treatments for people on blood thinners. So that would be a conversation that you need to have with the physician you see that evaluates you for those treatments. Yes?
How do the microbleeds interact with the diagnosis of dementia? Because microbleeds can cause dementia, if I'm not mistaken.
It doesn't help. Just if you have just like having a stroke or cerebral amyloid angiopathy or superficial siderosis, those are a lot of leaky things that can happen in the brain that has to do with blood vessels and other things. There's no way to really know what's causing what, but it is not necessarily an uncommon thing for people that just have Alzheimer's disease to have what we call microhemorrhages.
But do you treat them the same?
Yes, so yeah, do you treat them the same? Yeah, you would treat them no differently, but if they had a high level microhemorrhages, you may not recommend these treatments.
Okay.
Yeah, because of the known side effect. Yeah, thank you. Oh wait, cards, I'm so sorry.
You're okay. Just to kind of coincide with that.
Is that a follow-up to that question?
No, I just had a quick question as to where you begin the assessment and evaluation. Is it with your primary care doctor?
Oh, that is a good question.
I mean, if you see changes, if someone sees changes in their thinking and personality.
So I would say if you see changes and you start talking to your primary care physician, they should refer you or do their own assessment. Or if they say, oh, you're fine, I've been following you for 15 years or whatever, and you're still noticing changes, try to seek out a specialist and ask if they need a referral. Really advocate for yourself.
Which specialist do you recommend?
Boston Center for Memory.
No, a neurologist or
So a lot of people, well, here's the thing. So my background is neuropsychology, okay? You can see a general neuropsychologist because you got to have cognitive assessment. But if they don't specialize in this area, they may give you 8 hours of battery of assessment and not really get to the bottom of things. No different than a general neurologist, right? And my point is in all of this is you want to see somebody that specializes in memory disorders. Not to be clear, I'm not saying that general neuropsychologists or general neurologists cannot do a great job, evaluate and treat and all of those things. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is if you see somebody, you're still noticing changes, don't hesitate to get a second opinion. But you may, at that point, if you're still noticing changes, you see somebody that's more generalized, you may want to see somebody that's all they do to get to the bottom of things.
Don't you need a referral to go? I mean,
It depends on where you go.
just pick up the phone and call a neurologist and say, I'd like to see you. Don't you need some kind of referral?
It depends on the practice if you need a referral.
And sometimes they're insurance.
Sometimes insurance requires it, sometimes the practice requires it, so you just have to ask.
Right.
Yeah, are you saying if the primary care physician isn't recommending a referral?
I don't know, I haven't talked to
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But what should people do if they're not getting the referral from their primary care? Do you have suggestions on that? It's a great point.
That is a great point, Sarah. I would try to find a place that does free memory screens, which we do at Boston Center for Memory.
Great follow-up. All right, so a few more questions that we have time for. How early can new FDA treatments be used?
Great question. So you can use them as early as a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment with positive pathology through an amyloid PET scan is the earliest that you can get this kind of treatment. If you're going any earlier, it would be through the guise of clinical research only. Insurance does not cover, nor would your physician allow you to get treatment unless they detect symptoms and you have a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment based on an evaluation.
Thank you. Right now, what is the most promising development in Alzheimer's research that might be coming down the pike?
Ooh. Most promising is hard to say, but I would mention a couple of things. We're looking at anti-tau treatments that I think is really encouraging because amyloid leads to tau, and kind of once we reach tau, things get moving in the brain in terms of symptoms. So I would say anti-tau treatments because eventually these things are going to be put together. There's also an interesting newer treatment. We call it the shuttle treatment because it crosses the brain barrier and gets to that pathology really quickly. And this is next generation treatment. So I would say probably those two things in terms, if we're talking about very early treatment.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, I do want to answer everybody's questions with their hand raised, but I know we have cards.
Well, hopefully I think some of the people that were raising their hands also had cards.
Oh.
Some of the questions.
Okay.
So does Medicare pay for the diagnosis and treatment?
Yeah, so Medicare, I am not a Medicare expert, to be clear, so don't quote me on this. And AJ McDonald may know better than I do. In fact, I guarantee she knows better than I do.
We actually have Medicare open enrollment on October 28th, so sign up for that.
Thank you. Medicare open enrollment on October 28th, did you say?
Yes.
Excellent.
They cover 80% of the neuropsych eval, typically for Medicare. So if you have Medicare, come see us, we're all set. But if you have further Medicare questions, you can also just call me and I can help you out.
And if you buy the Medicare supplements,
Yep, it will
most of
supplement
them
the
will
additional
cover,
20%.
will fill in
Yes.
most of that gap.
Correct.
Great advice. So it is said that dementia affects more women than men. Is this correct?
Yes. Also, the highest risk is age. And as women, we tend to live longer. So there's absolutely, there's a lot of caveats to that, but yeah.
Well, they also make a quick question and remark, then why do groups of caregivers include way more women than men?
Wow, if you can address that question for me. I think probably because if you think about it, men are developing this at younger ages, right? We know the lifespan of men. So we tend to be caregivers, but I see what you're saying. Boy, that's a really good one. That's a riddle.
Well, women are used to going to support groups and men aren't.
Yeah, that's true too. I see, I tend to see, I don't want to generalize it, but I tend to see less men going to support groups, but it doesn't mean that doesn't happen.
Next question, when you see a change, how long do you have to treat? I guess how long should they should waste no time?
Yeah, exactly, Sarah. I would not guesstimate that. I would say if you're seeing a change, go get detected and treated. If that change is really due to Alzheimer's disease, mild cognitive impairment due to Alzheimer's disease, because what is universal in the literature is early is better. And that's also why they're looking at treatment trials now and even earlier and earlier indications. Anti-amyloid therapy, I'll give you an example. Anti-amyloid therapy took so long because we were doing anti-amyloid treatment in people in later stage disease. And what we learned over time is in people in later stage disease weren't benefiting from these treatments. So we kept having to move the needle earlier and earlier and earlier on. So if you're noticing changes, do not wait. You may be surprised that we're not saying that this is due to anything. I had a patient the other day that I got to give that news to. So just don't guess. You want to treat and detect as early as possible.
Thank you. We got 2 questions left and we may have time for a few more if you have not submitted a card. So are you affected by governmental or anticipated federal research cuts?
Yeah. So not through A lot of our treatments are through pharmaceutical industry, which, as my understanding right now, is not being impacted. However, we do a lot of NIH research at Boston University. I haven't seen the direct impacts yet of the things I'm involved in or my colleagues, but we've seen a lot of other things get impacted, like programs for caregiving and things of that nature, but I don't know all the exact details of that, so I can't speak as well to that. But the direct research that I'm involved in, I haven't seen an impact.
Thank you. So I have one more question, and then feel free to add additional, but this was my favorite. Who takes Walter home after hours?
That would be me. Yeah, you find him in my office a lot naturally because he does go home with me. So he does a lot of sleeping under my desk. He lays in the middle of the floor. That makes it challenging sometimes when people walk in. And he doesn't budge. I've run over him with my chair before. He just kind of hangs out. He's kind of a bump on a log.
So hopefully we got to your questions, but any more, please.
Is your clinic only interested in Alzheimer's, not any like Lewy body or any of the other dementias?
It's not about interest. We do evaluate and treat people with Lewy body disease. We have done some clinical research in Lewy body in the past. There's just a lot of research out right now in Alzheimer's disease. We're currently not doing any clinical research in Lewy body disease, but we frequently evaluate people with Lewy body disease. In terms of co-pathology, Lewy body disease is the first, second cousin, right? And I think we're learning more about the co-pathology of Alzheimer's and Lewy body. In fact, just today we had a meeting where we're looking at alpha-synuclein in Lewy body and doing skin biopsies for people that have Alzheimer's disease, were treated in the prior donanemab trials, and we're going to be looking at that pathology. It's not treatment, but we also do a lot of diagnostic work.
If you find somebody with it, then do you send them someplace else?
No. Unless, the only thing that we do is if somebody has a pure motor disorders diagnosis, such as a true Parkinson's disease. If people have I'm saying true, I don't know why, but if people only have Parkinson's disease, I don't mean to make that sound weird either, only. The reason I'm saying that is people that have Parkinson's disease, cognition looks a little different. You're not going to see the type of cognitive changes that you'd see in Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body disease. We have a lot of people that are referred to us from motor disorders clinics at hospitals to evaluate them from Alzheimer's disease because they have Parkinson's disease and they're starting to notice cognitive change. Sometimes we evaluate them and say, no, this is clearly cognition due to Parkinson's, or they may also have Alzheimer's disease. But the only time we really refer is if we think that they just have Parkinson's disease and we're not seeing a lot of the memory changes, because we want them to see specialists that solely focus on motor disorders. Because we want our patients in the best hands of the people that specialize in that. We may refer, for example, if somebody has a language variant, PPA, frontal temporal dementia, we want to refer them to resources of folks that's all they do as well. It's not that we don't evaluate and treat. We do follow people that have FTD and other language disorders, but it just depends on what the needs are and what resources we think would be helpful to them.
Thank you.
Of course. Yes.
Isn't the best way of detecting these brain disorders a PET scan or CAT scan of the brain first off?
Yeah, so the best way to detect these disorders is through a PET scan if it's for Alzheimer's pathology. There are certain specialized PET scans that look for activity in the brain, but it's not definitive. So it depends on what you're looking for. A lot of conditions like FTD don't have definitive biomarkers. It's more still of a clinical diagnosis.
But you can see the amyloid plaque buildup.
Yes, through an amyloid PET scan, you can see whether amyloid pathology is present. Yes.
This will be our last question, sorry folks.
How is Alzheimer's different from Parkinson's, and how do you test for the difference? In other words, if you suspect Parkinson's, is it a completely different test?
Okay. It's the same evaluation. It's still the same clinical evaluation, but on a neuro exam is how you typically, a neurological exam is how you typically pick up the symptoms of Parkinson's. So we talk about cogwheeling, shuffling of the gait, mass facies, those kinds of symptoms can be consistent with Parkinson's. In Parkinson's disease, you're not going to see the kind of patterns on cognitive assessment as you would Alzheimer's disease. So there is a specialized scan called a DAT scan that can give you a sense of whether this is Parkinson's disease. It's not definitive, but it is helpful to have that. But if you're having significant cognitive changes on assessment, you likely have Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease, which you can have both. Yeah.
So it's a DAT scan and they can overlap.
They can overlap. And in fact, I think the more we're learning over time, the more we're realizing that a lot of people have co-pathology in the brain. Yeah. Yeah,
So
of course.
Alzheimer's is a type of dementia.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the most common cause of dementia. Yes.
Does mobility issues sometimes correlate with the mild cognitive? My husband said mild cognitive, maybe some going to a little more moderate for about 6 years. But he's had mobility issues, especially on one leg that shakes. He was tested for Parkinson's, but he doesn't have that. But he has serious one he has neuropathy, but the other one developed maybe a few years after that, since he had the dementia.
Yeah, there's a lot of literature out there that people can have different forms of tremors, different mobility issues. You know, these are all neurologically related conditions, right? Yeah, so, but people have a lot of different symptomatology or can have forms of dementia.
I want to say thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you very, very much.